The distress beacon blinked on Captain Lila Voran's console like a pulse from a dying star. It was faint, irregular but unmistakably human. The signal originated from New Dawn Colony, a mining outpost on the edge of the treeless expanse. Lila's crew aboard the Stellar Vigilance had been patrolling nearby, chasing down rumors of rogue traders, but nothing could have prepared them for this. "New Dawn?" murmured Lieutenant Jax Haller, adjusting his headset to confirm the coordinates. "That can't be right. The colony was declared lost 7 years ago, no survivors." Lila frowned. Then why is it calling for help now? The New Dawn Colony had been a lucrative operation, a sprawling hub that mined rare minerals essential for interstellar travel. When communications ceased abruptly, rescue missions had found nothing but silence and empty halls. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just gone. The incident became a cautionary tale among spacers, whispered in mess halls and over stiff drinks. Now, the beacon. As the Stellar Vigilance approached the colony's last known location, unease seeped into the crew. New Dawn wasn't on any star maps anymore, but as they closed in, its silhouette emerged through the swirling dust of the expanse. "Visuals online," Jax reported, his voice tight. The colony's structure was intact, but wrong somehow. It shimmered faintly as if caught between reality and a dream. Lila's heart pounded as the view expanded on the main screen. "I thought the place was destroyed," said Ensign Marin, her tone uncertain. "Me too," Lila replied, her voice dropping. The unease swelled as details sharpened. The lights were still on, glowing a pale green. Automated mining equipment lay scattered, seemingly abandoned mid-operation. But there was no movement. "Captain," Jack said, swallowing audibly, "we're receiving a voice transmission now. It's distorted." A crackle filled the room, followed by a voice barely recognizable as human. "Do not enter. Not alone. They see." The words dissolved into static, then cut out entirely. The crew exchanged glances. "Could be an old recording," Marin suggested, her voice wavering. "Or a trap," Lila countered, narrowing her eyes at the screen. The colony shouldn't be there at all, yet it beckoned. Against her better judgment, Lila ordered a landing. The shuttle descended in tense silence, the colony looming larger with every second. The docking bay was pristine, too pristine. No dust, no damage, not even a scuff mark. As the crew stepped out, their boots echoed hollowly against the floor. "Where's the debris?" Marin asked, running a hand along a wall. "This place looks like it was scrubbed clean." Lila's voice came low and firm. "Stay close. We're here to investigate, not to be heroes." The deeper they ventured, the stranger it became. Personal belongings were scattered as if their owners had simply vanished mid-task. Plates of half-eaten meals sat untouched on tables. A child's drawing fluttered in a stale breeze. "Captain," Jax called, his voice shaking, "I've got something." The crew gathered around him at a terminal. Jax pulled up the last security log, his hands trembling slightly. The footage showed colonists bustling about as usual. Then the timestamp jumped and the screen filled with static. When the image returned, the halls were empty. "Playback again," Lila ordered, her stomach tightening. This time, they noticed it. A faint distortion in the static, like shapes writhing just out of sight. "What is that?" Marin whispered. Nobody had an answer. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a low hum reverberated through the walls, like a deep, guttural sigh. "Did anyone touch anything?" Lila barked, scanning her crew. Jax shook his head. "Negative." Then, faint footsteps echoed down the corridor behind them. "Who's there?" Lila shouted, spinning around. The hallway stretched into shadow, but it felt alive, like the darkness itself was watching. The lights flickered again, and Lila's voice dropped to a whisper. "Stay close," she said, "and don't look back." The footsteps stopped, but the air felt heavier with every passing moment. The crew huddled closer together, their breath shallow as they scanned the dim corridor. The walls seemed to pulse, the faint green glow shifting like a heartbeat. "Captain, this place feels wrong," Marin whispered, her eyes darting to every shadow. "Focus," Lila replied, gripping her plasma cutter tightly. We need answers and we need to get out. Jax, can you pull up a map of the colony? Jax fumbled with his handheld device, the screen flickering as he accessed the colony's systems. Got it, he said. There's a central command hub a few levels down. If there's any explanation, it'll be there. Then that's where we're heading, Lila said, her voice firm despite the gnawing fear clawing at her chest. As they moved deeper into the colony, the sterile cleanliness began to give way to something else. Walls once pristine were streaked with dark, oily smears, as though something had been dragged through the halls. The lights flickered more frequently, casting fleeting shadows that seemed to ripple unnaturally. Captain, Marin said, her voice trembling. I swear I saw something move back there. Lila glanced over her shoulder but saw only darkness. Eyes forward, she ordered, though her hand tightened on her weapon. They reached an elevator shaft, its doors pried open, revealing a dark abyss below. The control panel was unresponsive. We climb, Lila said, gesturing to the maintenance ladder inside. One by one they descended, their movements deliberate and cautious. The farther they climbed, the more oppressive the air became, thick with the scent of decay. What's that noise? Jax asked, pausing on the ladder. A faint whispering sound seemed to emanate from the walls, growing louder as they descended. It wasn't static, it was voices, overlapping and indistinct, like 1,000 secrets being shared in a language they couldn't understand. Keep moving, Lila urged, though her own heart was pounding. They reached the command hub, a cavernous room filled with flickering monitors and dormant consoles. The air was frigid, their breaths visible in the dim light. Jax hurried to a terminal, his fingers flying over the keys. Logs are intact, he said, pulling up the last recorded data. The screen filled with reports, unusual energy fluctuations, unexplained equipment malfunctions, colonists reporting vivid hallucinations. The final entry was a single line, typed frantically. The veil is thinning. They are coming. What does that mean? Marin asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, the whispers grew louder, coalescing into a low, guttural moan that filled the room. The lights dimmed until only the glow of the monitors remained. Captain, something's... Jack started, but his words cut off as the shadows in the room deepened, pooling unnaturally in the corners. A shape began to emerge from the darkness, a mass that defied logic, shifting and writhing like a living void. Eyes, dozens of them, blinked open within the blackness, each one staring directly at the crew. Move! Lila shouted, raising her plasma cutter. She fired, the beam slicing through the entity, but it had no effect. The shadows rippled, absorbing the light. The entity surged forward, a tendril of darkness lashing out and narrowly missing Marin as she dove out of the way. Run! Lila barked, grabbing Jax and shoving him toward the exit. The crew sprinted back to the elevator shaft, the whispers now a deafening roar. The shadows seemed to follow them, growing larger, more aggressive. As they scrambled up the ladder, Marin screamed. Lila turned to see a tendril wrapped around Marin's ankle, pulling her downward. Help me, Marin cried, her fingers clawing at the rungs. Lila fired again, the beam severing the tendril. Marin scrambled free, but her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. What was that thing? Jax panted as they climbed higher. I don't know, Lila admitted, her voice shaking. But it's not letting us leave. They emerged onto a higher level, slamming the maintenance door shut behind them. The whispers receded, but the crew's relief was short-lived. On the wall opposite them, a message was scrawled in dark, dripping letters. You're already part of it. The message dripped onto the floor like blood, its words defying reason. Marin stumbled backward, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. What does that mean? She stammered, clutching at Lila's arm. It means we're not alone, Lila said, her voice grim. She scanned the hallway ahead, the flickering lights casting jagged shadows on the walls. We need to find another way out, now. Jax brought up the map on his handheld device again, his hands trembling. There's a service tunnel that leads to the outer docking ring, he said. If we can reach it, we might be able to launch an escape pod. Then let's move, Lila said, taking point. The crew made their way through the maze-like corridors, the oppressive whispers seeming to press against their minds. The air grew colder and their footsteps echoed unnaturally, as though the halls themselves were amplifying the sound. "Captain," Jack said quietly, "I think the shadows are watching us." Lila didn't respond, but she'd felt it too, the unmistakable sensation of being observed. She tightened her grip on her weapon, her eyes scanning every corner. As they turned a corner, they froze. The corridor ahead was filled with colonists, or what was left of them. Their bodies were frozen in place, standing upright, their eyes wide and lifeless. A faint black mist clung to their forms, undulating as though alive. "What the hell?" Marin whispered, stepping closer despite herself. "Don't," Lila warned, but it was too late. One of the colonists twitched, its head jerking sharply toward Marin. Its mouth opened wide, impossibly wide, and a guttural scream erupted, shaking the walls. The other figures began to move, their limbs cracking and twisting as they turned to face the crew. "Run!" Lila shouted, pushing Marin back. The crew bolted, the sound of shuffling feet and guttural screams echoing behind them. The lights flickered violently, plunging the corridor into strobe-like chaos. "They're right behind us," Jax yelled, glancing over his shoulder. "Keep moving," Lila barked, her heart pounding as she led the way toward the service tunnel. They burst through the hatch into the tunnel, slamming it shut and sealing it with a manual lock. The screams outside faded, but the whispers persisted, growing louder, more insistent. "This tunnel should take us to the docking ring," Jack said, his voice shaky. "It's a straight shot." But as they moved deeper into the tunnel, the walls began to change. The metal surface darkened, warping into an organic texture that pulsed faintly under their touch. "This wasn't on the map," Marin said, her voice barely audible. "Just keep moving," Lila ordered, though doubt gnawed at her. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber that shouldn't have existed. The walls writhed with the same black mist they'd seen on the colonists, and in the center of the room stood a towering obelisk, its surface covered in shifting symbols. Jax approached it cautiously, drawn despite his fear. This is what they found," he murmured. "It's the source." "The source of what?" Lila asked, but she already knew the answer. The obelisk pulsed, and the whispers reached a deafening crescendo. The mist coalesced into a form, a towering figure with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce their souls. "Welcome," it said, its voice a chorus of 1,000 overlapping tones. "You have come to join us." "What do you mean, join?" Lila demanded, stepping forward. The figure tilted its head as if amused. "The veil has lifted. Your kind opened the door, and now you belong to us." "No," Lila said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "We don't belong to anyone." She raised her plasma cutter and fired, the beam striking the obelisk. The symbols flared brightly, then dimmed, but the figure remained, unflinching. "You cannot destroy what is already part of you," it said, spreading its arms. Suddenly, Marine screamed. Dark tendrils erupted from the floor, wrapping around her legs and pulling her toward the obelisk. "Help me!" she cried, her voice breaking. Lila and Jax grabbed her arms, pulling with all their strength, but the tendrils were too strong. Marin's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Don't let me go." But they had no choice. The tendrils dragged her into the mist, her screams fading as the obelisk absorbed her. The symbols glowed brighter, pulsing in time with the whispers. Lila and Jax stumbled back, their breaths ragged. The figure loomed over them, its hollow eyes unrelenting. "You cannot leave," it said. "You are already ours." Lila grabbed Jax's arm. "We need to go. Now." They sprinted back through the tunnel, the walls closing in as the mist pursued them. The docking ring came into view, but the escape pods were gone, their cradles empty. "No, no, no," Jax yelled, pounding his fists against the control panel. "There has to be another way," Lila said, scanning the room desperately. Her gaze fell on a maintenance hatch leading to the exterior of the colony. "We'll go outside," she said. "Suit up and tether to me." They donned their EVA suits, the mist pounding against the sealed doors as they stepped into the void. The colony's exterior was a twisted amalgamation of metal and organic matter, pulsating like a living creature. As they drifted away, tethered to each other, Lila felt a strange pull as though something was calling her back. She looked over her shoulder and saw the figure watching them from a viewport, its hollow eyes glowing faintly. "You can't escape the veil," its voice echoed in her mind. "You are already part of it." They floated in silence, the colony receding into the expanse. But the whispers, they never stopped.